We're on the verge of what many would refer to as genomic success. Now, have you heard about the Genomic project? And raise your hand if you've heard about this. This is fascinating. So on one hand, it is true that there's more baby boomers, but a baby boomer's life expectancy is not going to be as long as children today, or even my children, who will easily, let me repeat this, live to be 100 years old. And with the quality of life, because of what you baby boomers have paid into all those entities and all these scientific breakthroughs that are happening, that are going to allow us to battle disease that has ravaged so many of our citizens and provide them with a quality of life, is what one generation does for another. And we're on the verge of this taking off here in this country because of all the work and effort that's gone into this over the last 25 years. So again, this isn't something that shows up. But we faced a very severe problem in the country with more than 44 million people that didn't have any form of insurance coverage. I stop there and say they didn't have any form of insurance coverage, but they did have health care coverage. Do you know what their health coverage was? Anyone want to? You said it. Say it again.
Emergency room.
The emergency room, where everybody showed up, from a common cold to a fretting mother who didn't know what her child had, didn't know what people were contracting to, the most simple things. And you know, if you've been in an emergency room or a hospital, you know that if you've been there, you went there and you found that it was overcrowded. And that the hospitals were required under law to take people in and care for them. That's a good thing. But I ask you, who paid for that?
We did.
Let me reiterate. You did. You did. But it's one of those unseen taxes that was passed on to the American people. So, if you're in favor of repealing Obamacare, as they derisively call it, and as the president smiles and says, well, yeah, I do care. And then you would, in essence, be going back to a system where you have a tax on all policyholders, albeit a hidden tax, that estimates say range about $1,000 per household. $1,000 per household. Well, the system wasn't working. It was broken. It needed the attention of Congress. And so, there were many ideas that were proposed. Now, many Democratic ideas, and I know a lot of people in this room favored an approach of single payer, Medicare for all, or making sure that there was only one payer, and that was the government. That's not how our system evolved. And that's not what we ended up with. What we ended up with, through compromise, was an idea, you ready for this, that was modeled by the Heritage Foundation. Are you familiar with the Heritage Foundation? Well, the Heritage Foundation is a conservative think tank, very capable, bright minds, etc., that said this, in essence, why don't we do this? Why don't we try to come up with the best system, take the very best of public health, all the public health, public nursing, public school systems, our hospitals, all that the Center for Disease Control, the National Institute of Science and Health, all that our labs, everything that public health provides, and then add to that everything entrepreneurial and from an incentivized method that the private sector could bring. And then if we were to bring full bore all that technology and innovation, all the results of the Genomic project, etc., and we pulled together as a country, we could have the most unique and the most dynamic healthcare system in the world. Well, and you know what? They got someone who was a willing partner to do this. They said, we need a pilot. We need someone to experiment with this. We need someone to make sure that this works, that we could put it out there to the people, and then we could get it up and running and see if it works. And they did. And lo and behold, wasn't it a Republican governor in a Democratic state with a Democratic legislator, whose name just happens to be Mitt Romney in Massachusetts. That is the model of health care that the Affordable Health Care Act presents. Now, it is not without its flaws, it's not without its blemishes, and with any program, when you're starting to roll it out, it's going to have kinks and problems. But notwithstanding all of those problems, can we not sit down and reasonably come up with a way? And if you're going to repeal it, what are you replacing it with? Are we going to go back to a hidden tax on all policyholders in an untenable situation that existed? Or are we going to move forward together and take the best of public health, the best of the private sector, and all that science, technology, and innovation can bring to bear on this problem and solve it? That's what Americans do. We solve problems. We end up in a place where we take an idea and concept, we test it, we pilot it, we put it out there, and it makes us bold enough to say that we can put a man on the moon within 10 years and do it in 9. It makes it also possible for us to say, and we can have health care for the American people and make sure that our citizens are well. And we can do it affordable, and we can do it within their means. Now, interestingly, so fast forward, the bill passed. Many in Congress, the House of Representatives, that was controlled by Democrats when it passed, lost. People lost their seats over this issue. You may recall that so many of these things were referred to as death panels. You know what a death panel is? Death panel is you sitting down with your doctor and your loved one and saying, we've got decisions to make with regard to end of life. I know. I went through this personally. I know what it's like to sit there with your mother and surrounded by a loving family, and to her say to the doctor, I don't want to be intubated. I want to die comfortably with my family around me. That's all I want. But I don't want any more plugs and pills or anything else. I want to go the way God intended me to go. Surrounded by my family, God willing, and at home. Well, it didn't work out that she got to be at home, but it did work out that she was surrounded by her family. But to say that that's what a death panel is, in that it's a scheme that would allow doctors to put people to death, is hardly what the act or the goal was trying to accomplish. Yet that was the way that it was portrayed. And you've all heard about how it's going to wreak havoc for most people. 90% of most people, like people on Medicare, are not going to be impacted by the law, but for the fact that its changes, including pre-existing conditions, and the ability to get insurance where you previously could not, and to cap costs so that you cannot go bankrupt. More bankruptcies and foreclosures on homes happen because of health care problems than any other issue. That's why